Welcome, debtors and borrowers, to Bankruptcy Bailout, because debt ruins lives, not bankruptcy. Before we get going, please like this video and subscribe to this channel so we can keep bringing you informative content related to your financial situation, student loans, and debt. So I appreciate that, and thank you very much for your subscription. Now, my name is Matt Berkus. I'm a Colorado-based bankruptcy and student loan relief attorney, and today we're doing our update on the status of student loan forgiveness. This will probably be the last update of the year, so this is the December 2022 update on the status of student loan forgiveness. So let's get into it because, as you know, this is a huge situation and a huge mess. So, as of right now, making this video, the Supreme Court has decided to hear the case that came out of the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals. That case is Biden versus Nebraska. And basically, that was the issue of the state saying, hey, look, you don't have the authority to issue this kind of $10,000, $20,000 carte blanche forgiveness. And so the questions that are being raised in that case are, A, whether the states have standing, but the Supreme Court has stated in its grant to hear the case that it will also consider the substantive issue of whether the executive branch has the authority to issue this type of forgiveness, and whether the forgiveness, in their words, whether the forgiveness is arbitrary and capricious. Okay, so, and I think the reason the Supreme Court is doing that is it's a nod to the other case, which is out of the Fifth Circuit, where the district court, the federal district court in that case, ruled substantively that the individuals who brought that case, A, had standing, and B, that the executive branch didn't have the authority. So procedurally, the court is essentially consolidating the two cases and saying, okay, we're going to decide the issue. An oral argument is going to be scheduled for February of 2023. But in the meantime, student loan forgiveness is on pause. It is essentially dead in the water. The Department of Education website is not taking any applications. There was this sort of little bit of brouhaha that the Department of Education sent out an email to something like 9 million people saying, hey, we've approved your forgiveness, but because of these court cases, we can't actually update your account, so we're just waiting to see what happens. So that happened and caused a whole bunch of confusion. So we have the Supreme Court hearing the case and going to decide the issue of whether the Biden administration has the statutory authority to issue this kind of forgiveness. And we're talking about that $10,000, $20,000 forgiveness for those making under $125,000 a year. Another thing that came up is the Biden administration has extended the payment pause again. Now the payments on federal student loans are going to be paused until June 2023, for better or for worse. I think if my suggestion here is that if you have the means to make your payment, start making your payments. Start drilling into that principal balance, because the interest rate right now is 0%. So everything you pay is going to go towards your outstanding principal balance, because there's no accruing interest. All right. Now, if you already have accrued interest, that's a different issue. But generally speaking, you're going to be paying down your balance. And when these student loans eventually go back into repayment, you'll just be ahead of the game, and you'll have a lower balance for interest to accrue on, and that's a good thing. So, if you have the means to pay it and you're not financially struggling, you should really consider starting to repay your student loans, notwithstanding the payment pause. Of course, there's other considerations there as well. But what else is out there? What else is out there regarding forgiveness and so forth? Well, I mean, if you went to a for-profit university, I mean, there's already been a lot of movement on forgiveness for those who attended universities that defrauded them. And most for-profit universities are going to fall in that category, especially the ones that closed back in like 2014, 2015. And here we're talking about, the Corinthian colleges like Westwood, the Art Institutes, and just a whole slew. There's dozens of schools. But you have to be proactive about that forgiveness. You have to submit what's called a borrower defense to repayment application to the Department of Education. And the Department of Education basically is just streamlining the process. They've already made a decision on most of these schools. So there's an established timeline basically saying, you know, if you attended such and such school between these 2 dates and you got federal student loans, you're going to be entitled to some or all of your student loans being forgiven. So that's still out there for a lot of people, at least for the people most damaged by for-profit universities. And also recently, Biden administration or the Department of Justice came out and said they're going to be much more lenient about opposing bankruptcy discharges for student loans. I have another video where I talk about that issue more in depth, and I'll link that here and in the description below. But the bottom line is that up until recently, the Department of Justice would oppose any attempt to discharge student loans in bankruptcy because it's litigation. That process is a litigation process. So you have to sue the Department of Education in bankruptcy court in order to get discharge of your student loans in bankruptcy, and so they have the opportunity to oppose that, and up until now they've been opposing that. So they've announced a more streamlined, friendly process, and I think a lot of people, especially those who have had their federal student loans for more than 10 years, so if you've been in repayment for more than 10 years and you're still struggling, I think you become a very good candidate for bankruptcy discharge of your student loans, and you would also be a good candidate to have private student loans discharged in bankruptcy well, although understand that when you sue to have your private student loans discharged in bankruptcy, you're suing the lender, not the government, okay? But private student loans in general are slightly easier to discharge in bankruptcy because they don't have the same payment options and forgiveness options that federal student loans have. So there's still a lot of positive things, depending on your point of view, that have been happening with student loans. And the Department of Education has become much more lenient and easier to work with, at least for a lot of their programs, where before they were taking a hardline stance about being more proactive about rejecting applications for forgiveness. Now it seems like they're being more proactive in just accepting applications for forgiveness as long as the application is done properly and falls within the guidelines. They're generally going to accept it. So that's where things stand with student loan forgiveness. The $10,000, $20,000 program is essentially dead in the water. You know, I don't know what to predict here as far as why the Supreme Court took the case necessarily, because if the because generally if the Supreme Court's happy with the lower court decision, they don't need to take the case. So both the courts and the lower courts said, no, the federal government doesn't really have the authority to do this, and the Supreme Court decided to take the case. You know, maybe that's a good sign, maybe it's not. They're probably going to address the standing issue, but they're also going to address the substantive issue, and we'll see what happens. So as far as timeline goes, the oral arguments in February, the decision could be anywhere from probably made anywhere from April to June. We may get the decision in that case. Thank you. My name is Matt Berkus. I'm a Colorado-based bankruptcy and student loan relief attorney. I can assist those with student loans basically anywhere in the country, and I charge a $169 consultation fee to talk to you about your student loans and figure out how to get you pointed in the right direction, and I offer free consultations for the purposes of bankruptcy to the residents of Colorado. Best of luck to you.